They could have came to us and said, we'll pay you a net fee percentage of the annual salary to hire these 100 people. And that would have been great for us. Like, it would have been a very lucrative project, to be honest with you, Courtney, but that doesn't really solve for the short and like long term, right? So we want to grow with them. We see this next generation come in. We just don't want to be super transactional.
I love it. Hi, I'm Courtney Harmon, Director of Industry Relations at Create. This is the Full Desk Experience's Industry Spotlight Series. Welcome to the Full Desk Experience Industry Spotlight. This is the podcast that really kind of goes behind the scenes with leaders shaping the future of the staffing and recruiting industry. And I'm your host, Courtney Hartman. Today's episode, we have a truly dynamic leader joining us, Gary Benedik. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Avenica. And Gary's career has really spanned all facets of the talent acquisition world, from his early days of hands-on recruiter to building cutting-edge recruitment tech and marketplaces, and really been in the forefront of driving innovation while keeping laser-focused on exceptional experiences for clients and candidates alike. Gary also has a really fascinating professional journey that he's going to help us give a look inside Avenica's multi-brand approach. We're going to dive deeper in the biggest pain points and maybe influences plaguing traditional hiring processes across organizations. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Gary, talk about all the insights that he has to offer that's going to change your stance in the industry and shape your recruiting and staffing practices. So get ready, get a pencil, take notes. And Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you and learn from you and kind of your experiences.
What an intro, Courtney. Holy smokes. You sure know how to make a grown man blush. I'm happy to be here and I'm excited for this conversation.
I love it. So Gary, kind of talk to us and give us, our audience members, really the idea from your journey getting into the industry to your current role as CRO at Avenica. Kind of give me the whole overview. How'd you get here? How'd you evolve? Give me the background story.
Okay. I will try to do this as quick as I can in a somewhat elongated elevator pitch. Next year will be 20 years in staffing and recruiting. I started in 2005. I graduated college with an undergrad in engineering technology. Went to a recruiting firm that specialized in placing engineers. Interviewed with them. They provided me with a couple opportunities and interviews. I went back in and they're like, you know what? Have you ever thought about recruiting? And I said, no, tell me more. And they said, well, it is 100% commission, but all the people here on the floor are making so much money. And I said, well, shit, all I have is a student loan and a car payment. Let's take a stab at it while you continue to try to find me a job in the engineering space. And the rest is history. So that was a boutique firm out of Schaumburg, Illinois, that specialize, again, in matching engineers, mechanical, software, electrical applications. We were out there hunting engineering professionals and placing them with our clients. It was an interesting experience. It was almost like a boiler room type of environment. And for those that don't know boiler room, it's kind of eat what you kill. You know, they hired probably 10 to 15 new recruiters a quarter and one or two of them stuck. So it was an exciting path. I spent 5 years in that search environment. It was full desk. So I was hyper-focused on building relationships. The way that you were able to make the most amount of money is building business, not necessarily placing candidates. So I pivoted and focused on bringing in new clients while helping recruiters find the candidates to match to those open jobs. I spent 5 years there. As I matured in my career, I wanted to experience what the buyer was interpreting of what I was selling, aka corporate recruiting. So I left the agency and went into a full desk corporate recruiting role, but I was specializing in about 180 retail stores in the northeast part of the country. So it was high volume. Think about anything from a cashier at a Sears or Kmart store, leadership, divisional managers, loss prevention managers, automotive managers, etc. I spent about 6 months on the retail side and was invited onto the corporate side, where I then was able to support a true corporate recruiting environment where I was supporting about 20 of the different lines of businesses, anything from home appliances to soft lines to marketing, analytics, HR. I was a full-blown corporate recruiter on the desk, managing about 40 to 50 recs. Spent 4 years at Sears, moved my way up. By the time I left, I was leading the group. We were hiring well over 10,000 people a year and touching well over 1 million candidates annually through this tool back in the day called Connects a Brass Ring. I became very curious on how we could intelligently start using the platform, the AKA the applicant tracking system, versus relying on my humans, AKA the corporate recruiters on my team. So I left Sears in 2014, I believe, or 13, and I dove into the startup world. And the startup world that I dove into was all of us we're talking to about today: artificial intelligence and machine learning, recruitment marketplaces. I landed a consulting opportunity with this pioneer in the gig recruitment space called ShiftGig. So what we were doing at the time is we were matching on-demand lawyers, accountants, everyday working individuals to gigs, bartending gigs, back of office gigs, you name it. We were able to actually supply full-time employees into gigs. And we're able to digitize that experience for the company as well as the candidate or the worker through like a digital rostering type of environment. I spent about a year and a half in the startup world. At that time, I made a career choice to go back into the corporate space and joined which most of us know as Manpower Group. This was 2015. I came in as managing director in the Chicagoland area. I owned everything outside of IT, which would have been scientific, business professional, and engineering. Spent 2 years at Manpower Group. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about the MSP space. I learned a lot about outplacement. I learned a lot about bill rate, markups, margins, high volume, all the fun stuff we deal with every single day in the contingent workforce. I left. I was recruited out of Manpower Group to go to a startup called Scout Exchange. This is now 2017. They ideally wanted somebody that can run the marketplace that had exposure to both agency as well as corporate TA. So fortunately enough, I was able to speak the lingo of both buyer personas, the staffing agencies, as well as the hiring managers on the corporate TA side. And we built the marketplace, which was an awesome experience. Scout Exchange was a homegrown marketplace driven off of AI, matching about 520 employers to about 3,500 staffing and recruiting firms. So just think about like the predictability. If a large bank Northeast posted a bunch of recs in our marketplace, we were able to predict the time, the fee, who would be filling it. And it was a great experience. Unfortunately, this thing called COVID entered our life, disheveled our business in about 2020, and Scout Exchange was absorbed by their parent company, a large global staffing firm, and I was scared shitless. It was 2020, June. I had a 1.5-year-old and my wife was not working. So at that point in time, I just grinded. I just did as much as I can, talked to my network, and just started monetizing my time and talking about the things that other marketplaces should not do, and or getting back to the roots and doing some search. Fast forward 4 years later, that company was called Arch Advisory Group. I was able to build a recruiting firm, which we called it a modern day headhunting firm, built on transparency, authenticity, and speed. Fast forward 4 years, Scott Detman, who is the chief executive officer of Avenica, who I coincidentally worked with at Manpower, we were reintroduced, and his charm said, hey, what would you think about us acquiring Arch Advisory? You become part of Avenica. We bring in the Arch Advisory services, which is professional search, up through executive. You can now play in this whole like career matching, early in career data-driven model, and we can all be one big happy family. So I am now with Avenica as a chief revenue officer as of November 2023, and we're just trying to change the world, Courtney.
I love it. One person at a time. What an amazing story. You started at commission-only recruiting. Like, you look back at that to where you are today. I'm sure those experiences have shaped who you are and how you run your organization and the drive that you have. So that's truly amazing. I love it. You started obviously very hands-on. How did those early experiences shape your approach to talent acquisition and leading teams in today's market?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, early on in my agency days, Courtney, I soon realized that, in my opinion, the biggest asset that anyone can have is their network. So think about, the way that I would position myself is like, if I had a toothache, I knew where to go. If I had a flat tire, I knew who to call. I wanted to be that individual across my friends and family and acquaintances to say, if I have any questions in what's going on in the job market, or if I need to hire somebody, Gary needs to be the guy to go to. Early in my career, I wanted to brand myself as that individual in the employment market, just as people think as mechanics and dentists and, resources that we need every single day outside of like a career. That was kind of like a focus for me really early on. And thankfully, that focus allowed me to grow Arch Advisory, the recruiting firm that I built myself, based on those relationships that I tried to foster way back in the day. So even to this day, I'm always trying to coach my teams on like, sure, you work for Avenica. You're probably not going to be working for Avenica for the rest of your life. But if for some reason you decide to leave Avenica or things just don't work out, where are you going to go? Who are you going to talk to? Start building that network, that trusted network today, because they will come in handy. That was my philosophy. So that's one piece of advice that I'm giving everybody. Avenica is great and we're going to do really cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it's honestly, that's a taboo topic. Some leaders and staffing organizations are like, well, just talk to the people that you should talk to the recruiting firms. It's building their own brand. You're helping these people build their own brand, be an established thought leader in the industry, really stand out, because when they notice those people, they notice Avenica too. And so I love that your stance on that, because not everyone has that opinion as they lead people in this industry.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, people want to work with people they like personally, as well as you got to add value, right? It's not like old school sales where it was like close, right? You got to add value, then you can build rapport and expand the relationship. Right? It's a little bit different today, but people still want to work with people they like, genuinely.
Great advice. Okay. Obviously, in today's uncertain economic environment, staffing and recruiting industries are really navigating unique challenges since COVID. So from your vantage point at Avenica, what specific headwinds or obstacles are you seeing that are a force in the industry to adapt and evolve to?
I'm just going to respond to that based on my personal experiences, right? And what I've seen and how I was able to position Arch Advisory Group. So one is like everything evolves, right? So time evolves, candidates evolve. We're talking about skills-based hiring. That was in our conversation a decade ago, right? The majority of that all makes sense, right? And I think some of the biggest hurdles that we've had is actually helping hiring managers understand why things like that make sense. It's able to position, whether it's data or other success stories or business cases or folks like that came to us where we were able to solve problems. We still have to rely on trying to eliminate bias, trying to eliminate the emotion and subjectivity on saying, if you need to hire X person or this group of folks, we need to think differently. We can't hire people today as if we were still thinking about it, approaching that hire or those hires pre-COVID based on your ask, right? So some of the major hurdles that we were having when I was building Arch Advisor Group is getting hiring managers to think differently to hire people. And to think differently, that could be a bunch of different options, right? But just to be open to think differently and hiring best candidates, right? There's this, talk about talent shortages, and some of the data proves that, if you post a job, you're only seeing 14% of the eligible population to do that job. Like, we could say those things, but like we have to expect others to like be able to digest that, right? So I think that's like our biggest hurdle is like believing in what we see and what we've researched. That's easy.
So I don't want to read between the lines. Do you think that you guys take a more consultative approach when talking to your clients? Do you feel like that's kind of the stance that you've changed and how you really are different in the market?
Well, so Avenica, I mean, the end goal, we're solving the same problem. We're bringing in talent for our clients, right? In one of the divisions within Avenica, right? It's called AVL. We call it Avenica Launch, right? So we launch careers usually early in career folks, right? We get about 300 people entering our database a day. Let me give you an example, right? So one of those individuals entering our database might have an undergrad in journalism. What they research, what they see on the Google, what the university is telling them they should do to justify the cost of the university. They probably are thinking, I need to write a book, I need to be a teacher, I could be a writer, et cetera, et cetera. There's like prioritized options that they think they should follow from a career path perspective. Avenica will consider that, but we have an assessment and a leveling experience that allows for these individuals to actually consider other career paths that would never even be mentioned or introduced them up until this point. And that's through like a persona that we're able to create called Halo. It's our proprietary assessment where these folks go through this leveling experience. They learn a lot about themselves personally based on some things they're able to overcome, not in the professional workforce, not in a college project or an internship, but like things that they've come and gone through personally that we can prove paves the way in this career path. And you will be very successful. And here's the actual reward from a monetary perspective, career pathing perspective, the work you're doing perspective. So the Avenica launch model is still putting people to work, what all of our soft and hard competitors are doing. But the way that we're doing it is different, hence what I mentioned a few minutes ago.
I love that. I think that's amazing. Now, have you had to make any shifts internally, whether it's around strategy, whether it's around your approach to the industry based on the economic climate as of today's market? Or do you feel what you're doing today is really just proving value and you haven't had to make any shifts?
I mean, knock on wood, I'm fresh to Avenica. It's only been, a hot 7 or 8 months. And the reason that I sold my firm to Avenica after 6 weeks of diligence, talking to all my mentors and getting the approval from my wife, I believe in the model. And I've seen it work with large, well-established Fortune 500 brands. We have repeat business, and this has been going back for 5 years. So the machine continues to learn, for example, which personas will fit well within not just the industry, but the job category and the job subcategory, right? So think about insurance. Okay, there's 150 job titles within insurance. Claims. What level of claims? Like, we can pinpoint what persona would do well in that job title, that job subtitle, and then almost predict how long they'll be at that insurance company, for example. So to answer your question, we have not, knock on wood, the last 7 or 8 months, we haven't had to make big changes.
That makes complete sense. I love that. And I love your unique approach and the brands that you guys have. Obviously, you've been in this industry for a while. Is there any other, as you think of hiring processes across organizations, we have obviously operations leaders, CEOs, presidents that are listening to this podcast. As you have worked with these people across the 20 years that you've been in this industry, are there any maybe inefficiencies that you've observed consistently where people, as they look to grow, scale beyond the startup, because this is a time where when we have this kind of economic, uncertainty, people are like, how do I grow? How do I scale? How do I come out of this ahead? So let's talk about maybe some inefficiencies that you've seen within staffing and recruiting companies over the years. Is there anything that stands out first and foremost?
You're talking about Excel and elbow grease and whiteboards. That's not the way to run a business these days.
Well, I mean, I love me a good whiteboard, but I'm just saying, is there anything that stands out that maybe you've seen across all of your time in the industry?
Well, yeah. I mean, the truth be told is the reason that we were introduced, Courtney, is because we committed to Crelate, right? And we're going to be expecting very large things from the tool to help us get smarter and be more effective, not necessarily efficient, but more effective in the way that we run our business for our clients, right? So obviously the technology piece is being discussed all day, every day of our lives. Then you have ancillary things like how do you inject artificial intelligence to get smarter and learn patterns to predict and help shape our behavior and what we should focus on, which those are things that we're testing all day and every day. So I'd say, you have to have a robust tech stack in order to scale because, like I said, Excel and elbow grease and whiteboards are great, but we all know that that's not scalable these days. So I would encourage co-opetition. And what I mean by co-opetition is, back in the day in my headhunting days and, the leaders that kind of groomed me to be a headhunter were always very territorial. We're always like, we can't tell you who our client is, or, candidate ownership, or only work with us as a recruiter, right? I think those days are far and gone, right? There's plenty of opportunity within this world. And if you open yourself up to be vulnerable, be humble, and listen to your competitors, I think there's just a world of opportunity to share assets, even from as elementary as rev share, right? So I think I would encourage kind of a little bit more of an open co-opetition approach versus this is mine.
I think that's great. It's good advice. And, we oftentimes, as I've taught franchise owners, and it's the idea of, well, don't tell the client, don't tell where they're going to interview. And you're just eliminating the trust factor and all the things that you have talked about so far. It's establishing trust and establishing relationships. And I think those are the things that probably have made you excel in the industry. So I love that. But you mentioned, I'm going to go back to something you said. You said AI. AI continues to advance. This is something that you've kind of had in your past, in your background. And as it becomes more integrated into our recruitment processes, into our data, how do you strike the right balance between leveraging innovative AI and increased efficiencies while still preserving that human element? Is there obviously AI is like the easy button. People think it's the easy button, but sometimes we get distracted. Sometimes it's a shiny tech. Kind of give me your stance on AI, maybe how you guys are using AI in your firm and kind of what you're doing with it today.
There's so much to learn about AI, right? And I think, like you mentioned, efficient. Like, I am not focused on being more efficient, because that doesn't mean you're getting better or being more effective, right? So I'm always trying to help my folks understand, being more efficient doesn't necessarily help us be better, right? It could be getting more efficient and being bad, right? And I think that relates to a little bit of the same conversation on AI. It doesn't know if it's being vicious. It doesn't know if it's being bad, right? So I think there's a lot of discovery that needs to happen within AI, even from a public perspective. There needs to be some sort of legislation or something needs to happen, because it could get real bad if there's rules that are anchored around how people are using AI. And then if you reverse engineer that, Courtney, it's all about data integrity, right? So the machine is going to learn on what's coming in. And if it's not good stuff coming in, it's going to learn, and it's going to think or expect or assume that what's coming in needs to be replicated, or that's the information that it's learning from. Those are the patterns it's learning, right? It's not going to say these patterns are bad, you're going to jail. This is on the road to a felony, right? So I think we just need to be very careful to be able to dissect efficient versus effective, and also just ensure that if you're going to put more weight in leveraging AI to run your business, we have to be super focused on the data going in, the integrity of the data coming in. So with that being said, when we're swapping tech stacks, again, we're excited to see what Crelay could do for us. We're 2 weeks in, and we're working with your project managers, and we're learning a lot. It's actually forcing us to refresh, right? We have 900,000 people in our database, and we have 15 million different data points across those 900,000 records. What's the value, right? So do we even need that, right? We're researching and evaluating some of the models around. Maybe we only need the last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, because the value of that might be just as effective as going back to all 900,000 records, right? And also talk about implementation and migration of data. Then it's a whole nother conversation, right? So that's what we're evaluating right now, is how can we be more effective with all of this information we have? Not necessarily more efficient isn't the priority.
I love that. And I've sat through those migrations from our end, and not to talk about product, but it's really the idea, as they analyze, it's well, you have owners that are I can't lose this data, but the data was from 1991. You haven't contacted that candidate again, but you are hell-bent that you can't lose that data. What is that data? What are you going to do with that data today differently than you didn't do with it since 1991? So I love that. You had talked initially based on one of your brands, and I'm going to go back to this. One of the big conversations in 2024 through 2027 is really the upskilling and reskilling of markets. This is something that is kind of new, and not a lot of staffing and recruiting firms have really put an emphasis on that. So as we look at this, upskilling and reskilling being crucial for our job markets, what are maybe some of the key workforce trends or skill gaps shaping your solution offerings, and kind of what should be pressing that companies should focus on as they focus on this effort? Because we're going to have continued gaps between boomers retiring, people doing gig economy, not needing full-time jobs. It's something that we're going to have to put continued focus on in the future. Talk to me about upskilling and reskilling. What are you guys doing for that, and why should people focus on that?
So kind of the thesis of Avenica Inc. across our divisions is AVL, Avenica Launch, Early in Careers, A+, across Hire, Train, Deploy, Consultative, and then Arch, which is professional upstream through executive. So if we're actually explaining that to the supply side or the candidate, now we're talking about first job, next job, dream job. That's what we're trying to do on the supply side, right? And obviously that bleeds into the corporate side, where that's the customer, right? So that's the model: is first, next, dream. But in order to get from your first to your dream, what skills? And why call it AV plus? Think about a +1 skill. It could be as simple as learning Tableau. And now all of a sudden you go from an analyst to a senior analyst. And all of a sudden you go from, whatever you're making to another 10 or 15 grand a year, right? And we can help folks understand those types of decisions that you would need to make in order to go from your first to next or next to dream. So we want to be that platform or that resource for the supply side for these 300 people coming in a day, because we don't have 300 net new jobs a day. Not yet, right? But we want to be a resource to these individuals coming in that are not necessarily tunnel vision, but expecting to be a writer because they have an undergrad in journalism, right? So we want to have this self-service model where these individuals, these applicants, these candidates, we call them our community, can come in and learn what else is out there that caters to what they personally want to do with themselves, not necessarily what's been told to them or what they've researched on the Google. So with that being said, we're not upskilling within a certain market. We're not like in the cybersecurity space. We're not like incubating thousands of folks to turn into penetration testers, right? What we're doing is we're opening, this is a self-service model for the supply side to come in and saying, here's some of the data that we've seen. Here's the growth that we've seen across our clients, the candidates that we've placed at our clients. And if this is something you're interested in, here's the skills that you need to learn. Here's the context of the information you need to absorb and when. 8 months, 17 months, 24 months, you're going to get that promotion to a senior analyst. On the client side, this is where it's getting really interesting. So right before this call, we had a scoping meeting with a client of ours that has asked us to train their hiring managers on how to be recruiters. They have a small set of internal corporate recruiters. This is a global engineering company. They rely on their engineers, civil, geotech. Think about that skill set. They are great at what they do functionally. They're not going to be great at selling the company to attract candidates to be interested in taking a job. They have to hire 100 people in the next 12 months. So they've asked us to build content that's relatable to a civil engineer that will help them understand on how to position conversation, what to say in an email, how to overcome objection with candidates, to put on the recruiting hat 10, 15, 20% of their time to help meet their goal of hiring 100 people in the next 12 months.
That is very cool. And that's an evolution of our industry right there.
Well, it's great self-awareness by our client, right? And also, like you mentioned, the kind of generational pool where we're going to have to start kind of like building the next generation of engineers relative to this is they want their lifelong engineers that have been a part of their team for the last 10, 15 years, as they depart and retire, they want to be able to tell their story, but also like be able to tell their story to the next late folks coming in, while also being able to recruit them, keep them engaged, don't ghost them, in them well, ask their questions, all that jazz. And then we have another client that came to us and said, we have 170 global corporate recruiters. We want to force rank them all, and we want you to upskill a large population of these folks. It's just, we're having really cool, interesting, fun conversations, and we can't fix and solve everything, but we definitely want to listen to what's going on inside the business.
I think that's amazing. I love it. I'm so intrigued, and I'm so happy that their awareness on the client side is also building. It shows and attests to your relationships that you have with them, that they're listening. Because sometimes you even have to like teach and educate of you're not the only one selling yourself. It sounds like you're 10 steps past that, and what they're using you for to try to build is truly amazing. So I love it. I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, they could have came to us and said, okay, we want to pay you a net fee percentage of the annual salary to hire these 100 people. And that would have been great for us. Like, it would have been a very lucrative project, to be honest with you, Courtney, but that doesn't really solve for the near short, like even like the short and like long term, right? So we want to grow with them. We see this next generation come in. We just don't want to be super transactional.
I love it. Looking ahead, looking at the remainder of 2024, beyond into 2025, what are some key trends, development that you're going to be watching closely in the talent industry? Besides AI, obviously, that's a conversation. But is there anything that you're continuing to keep your pulse on, understanding where industry is going, or any way that you plan on pivoting in the next 6 to 12 months?
So Avenica, and the reason why I joined Avenica is super focused on the supply side, on the candidate, on the applicant. And I think California just raised minimum wage quite a bit. You see decisions being made to support the supply side, the applicant, the candidate, whatever we want to define that persona as. So us personally, we're going to invest a lot more on the supply side. Now, obviously, we want to solve problems for our customers and clients that need to hire people or train. But I think there's some really cool things that you could do on the supply side that, again, if you think about just like paying it forward in karma, they probably will become a hiring manager down the road, and maybe they will need to partner with a firm like ours, right? So it's mutually beneficial for us to spend time with candidates because hopefully we make a memorable impression for them. And maybe we get them to that senior analyst role and then they're a manager and they come back around. This is happening with Avenica. We onboarded a large logistics company, and the hiring manager we placed 9 years ago. He went in as a customer service rep, and now he's like heading all of sales. And he came back to us. He's like, "Oh yeah, you helped us. You helped me find this job. I now need to hire, several classes of folks."
Everything comes back full circle.
We don't have any secret sauce, Courtney. What we do know is that we're going to be even more focused on the supply side.
Have you seen in the past since COVID? I spoke with an economist last week, and as we were talking, I oftentimes when I'm at conferences, people are like, "Oh, we're down, we're down 15 to 30% year over year." But in reality, they're just down from the previous year because COVID in 2022 was record-breaking years. They're not actually down in their business. They just don't have job orders knocking down their door. Has that changed with Avenica and kind of what you've seen over the past few years? I know obviously you have a major focus on the supply side. Have you seen any adjustments and changes on your client side as you've been working with people over the years? I know you've only been there for so long, but have you seen a downturn in that, or have you guys been pretty steady?
The way that we were able to build our advisory, to be fully transparent with you, Courtney, is we were not a specialist in a certain job category or niche, right? There's very successful firms that go deep into IT or deep in engineering or deep into sales. Our focus was building credibility with internal talent acquisition, HR, procurement teams. Then we would flow with how this world changed every 10 to 12 months, right? So we were not dependent on a certain industry or even a certain category of skills. We were focused on supporting TA and supporting HR. So personally, that's how we were able to stay consistent and balanced through the fluctuation of this interesting world that we live in, right? So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It absolutely does. And obviously it's industry specific and who you work with is different. A lot of people steer clear of HR. They don't want to talk to HR. It's completely different in your approach for your business line. So no, that makes absolute sense.
Only because in my career, I played the role as like a head of talent acquisition in a corporate environment. It's not right or wrong, but it's nice to have conversations and talk about real problems that I personally experienced running a talent acquisition function with 31 different presidents that were all willy-nilly about search and worked with their, sisters, cousins, brother recruiting firm. And, so we could talk about real problems. And I actually physically experienced some of that pain, as well as our chief talent officer at Avenica. She also comes from internal talent acquisition leadership. So we have not necessarily better or worse, but it's an interesting seat at the table when we're talking to TA and HR. Hence that's why I built our advisory it was relatable.
You can change their trajectory of where they were going because you've been there, you've done that, you understand it full circle. So I think that's a great, unique position.
When it's good, it's good. When bad, it's bad. I feel for corporate talent acquisition, right? The corporate recruiters, that skill set has been through an emotional roller coaster, right? Especially COVID. Nobody wanted them. Then everybody wanted them. They were making more than software engineers. Then nobody wanted them. And now they're kind of like
ever changing. That's for sure. Our market ebbs and flows. And it's a fun roller coaster ride to be a part of. Is there any other words of advice based on your guys' 3 lines of business? What you're doing over there is truly revolutionary. Any other advice to leaders like yourself who are looking to expand, make their organizations better in this staffing and recruiting world as they look internally post this episode of what they could or should be doing differently?
I mean, I don't know how cliche this sounds, but just be normal, just be human, be authentic, respond to people, be transparent, don't ghost, don't not respond to emails. It seems so simple, but we all get busy every day. And all of that matters because people remember things, good and bad. As elementary and cliche as it sounds, it's just be a good human. To your people that report to you, to your bosses, to your peers, to your customers, just be vulnerable, be authentic. All have going on in our personal lives that bleed into our professional lives. And if someone's having a bad day, or if you're just feeling some heat from somebody that usually doesn't give you heat, give some space.
Great words of advice. I think it's something that we all need to keep forefront of our minds as, AI becomes more of a part of our day daily. We're getting more emails, we're getting more spam, we're getting more conversations, the human element is going to lead us through what this crazy, few probably uncertain years are as this thing develops. So I love that. I think that's really what makes a difference in our industry. And Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. I love your guys' unique stance and really how you handle the supply of what you're doing in our industry, guiding people to be better. And the start to dream and what that could be for people that are entering the workforce and beyond. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all of your insights, and I'm so excited to continue to watch your journey and as you join Crelate and the family.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a blast. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.